What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video for the First Descendant today, we are looking at Enduring Legacy, an ultimate machine gun for the game. Probably one of my favorite weapons in the game when it comes to actually taking on a Void Intercept boss with a gun. This does a decent amount of damage just by itself in any Descendant's hands, but it really reveals its true potential when you put it into a gun-built Descendant, so like a Hailey or an Enzo or a Valby or a Blair. Now, these Descendants are able to push up the critical hit rate of the gun, and then you really start seeing the insane power that this can push out. Every once in a while, you need to go spank a Void Intercept boss. It just is what it is. And of course, there are many options in the game right now on how to do it. There's certainly many ways to get it done. But it is super satisfying just walking these Void Intercept bosses down with this weapon and essentially one-magging pretty much every boss in the game, except for like Swamp Walker, which can sometimes be a little bit funky. There are times when you can actually get them right with the stun and you can get it done. But having a second mag in and then just getting it done that way is also not the end of the world, because you are playing a gun-based Descendant, so most of the times you can actually take a little bit of damage. But starting us off, let's go ahead and look at the unique ability, which is fairly easy to understand. The basis here being that craftsmanship allows you to, when you hit an enemy with a specific element, actually increase the status effect trigger rate of that element, and it inflicts a unique effect, a debuff on the enemy called quenching. Now, I do urge you, however, to build this weapon for fire. While you can use other elements, its true power really shows. The highest damage potential that you can get with it is with fire, and that's because quenching itself actually reduces the fire resistance of the target that you're shooting at. And then what it does is it actually, when you then hit a burning enemy, which by the way, when you shoot something with the fire element, you will set it on fire. So when you hit a burning enemy, it actually increases your firearm attack by 11%. So that's one of the reasons why fire is, or well, I would say probably the main reason why fire is the preferred element. But I've also seen other people run out with different elements and so on. So I mean, you do you, boo, but definitely fire is the way that we're going to build it today in this video. So starting us off, we are going to, the same way that we start off every build, we're going to slap in action and reaction, and we're going to get in rifling reinforcement. So this is the way every single build on every single gun starts. So far, we're all the same. Of course, because this is an LMG, it has a slow-ish fire rate. Fire rate is always a good thing for us, and because it has a slower fire rate, we don't have to worry about coming up against any sort of situation where our bullets get deleted or anything like that, because we're not going to get near to 1,000. But this is our three sort of starting points here. So we have 2 firearm attack rolls and we have a fire rate roll. Now at this point in time, it's absolutely time for us to introduce an element. As I mentioned, we are going fire, so we want to use fire enhancement. There we go. So fire enhancement is going to take 30% of our firearm attack and just actually add that as fire damage. So that's just another sort of like damage lever for us. At this point in time, we can also just have a look and see that we have 115 rounds in the magazine. Now this is, of course, this can be influenced by things like your substats and your weapon cores and so on. But from a mod's perspective, because this is an LMG and because I like the idea of essentially one-magging a Void Intercept boss, because yes, it does take a little bit of time to reload, but it's also just pretty badass to just walk a boss down, like I said, and just empty your entire fucking load all over him and watch him die. So 115 is not enough. We're going to go for a few more bullets. So we absolutely want to put in something like expand weapon charge. And then we're just going to double down on that. We're also going to put in concentrate support ammo. So this is going to give us a huge amount of additional bullets, and now we're sitting at 205. That's a hella size mag and more than enough bullets to kill pretty much every single Void Intercept boss in the game, except for something like Deathstalker, which for obvious reasons. And like I said, if you run into any kind of like issues with invulns or something, where Swamp Walker just tends to be like the sticky one. Like let's say for 1 out of every 3 Swamp Walker fights, you can actually just full on press him without him going invul, but he tends to kind of like just very easily pop into invul, and then of course that ruins all of our plans for, you know, world domination. So now at this point in time, we are using this on a gun Descendant, and we have to build some crit into it, because if we don't build, and of course crit damage, right? Crit damage is super important because we are going to be using gun Descendants who push up the crit rate, and crit rate is nothing without crit damage. If you have a shitload of crit rate, but you have like a 1.2 times multiplier, that's boopies. But yes, we do need to put in some crit rate and crit damage. The best sources of that at the beginning for our first two is, of course, better insight and better concentration. So we can absolutely put these two in here. That is going to give us some critical hit rate, and it's going to give us some critical hit damage. Now, we also have another critical hit damage mod, which is super good for us because it gives a massive amount of it. I'm of course referring to concentration priority, but this does come with a slight deficit though, because it has a reload time modifier penalty. Now, I just spoke about the reload on this gun, and it is fairly long. So the problem is, and I have noticed something ever since the patch, it seems like this figure here doesn't really update anymore with, and this is something that I only sort of like noticed yesterday. Let's just see if it updates here. Yeah, I don't know why, but it's like the reload times don't like update anymore with, even though it mentions the penalty here, right? You can see reload time modifier, boom, and watch what happens. So it's 2.7 seconds now. Okay, let's take that off. 2.7 seconds. Weird. But either which way, that doesn't change the point. It means that we are going to have a super slow reload. Of course, you can do something, called reload canceling, which is when you wait for half of the reload bar to sort of like run full, and then you roll or something like that. And that's actually just going to give you a full mag back. But the other reason why we put so many bullets in the magazine is then we don't have to worry about the reload, because the fucking enemy's dead before you have to reload. So dope. Now for our last mod here, because we have such a huge magazine, it absolutely makes sense, and also because this is an LMG, it absolutely makes sense to use something like mental focus. Mental focus is usable in other situations, but almost in a weird way is perfectly suited for LMGs due to the fact that it can stack all the way up to 150 stacks, and each one of these stacks gives you 1% of additional damage. So you lose this benefit after 2 seconds, or when you reload, or when you change your firearm. So it does give you a fire rate penalty here, all right? Which is another reason why it is good for us to have fire rate up, so we can at least nullify that penalty and give ourselves an additional bit of fire rate on top of that. But the point is, as long as you hold this trigger in and you're putting bullets into an enemy, you're going to just sort of ramp your bullets up more and more damage. And the longer you stay in the fight, the more lethal you are, up to the point where you reach your 150 stacks. And honestly, usually by that time, the enemy's dead. So good stuff all around. Now, when it comes to the substats that we want, it's kind of like the usual, right? So we absolutely want firearm attack, then we want firearm critical hit rate, and we want firearm critical hit damage. And then because this is my Colossus killing weapon, I want bonus firearm attack versus Colossus. And this is important, especially if you build your weapon cores the way that I did, because you need bonus firearm attack versus Colossus if you want to use the weapon core with additional damage against Colossus. So super important to remember that. Otherwise, it's just a dead roll for you. Now, speaking of weapon cores, let's have a look. With weapon core level 10, we've really kind of like reached the apex predator version of this weapon, because this allows us to actually, previously I had set up my 2 precision slots for both for sprint speed. It just felt really good because it is an LMG, so it does slow your character down a bit. So that kind of like counteracted it and made it just feel a lot better. But now, because we have level 10 cores, we don't need to double up on sprint speed anymore. We can have 1 core going all the way up to 20%, which is fantastic. And that leaves us the other precision core for basically grapple hook charge time increase. So this means then you pretty much have your grapple available and up at all times. It's almost possible to kind of like stay in the air permanently with 0.43. Although with Hailey, for some reason, it's weird where sometimes that second swing, she kind of like just like shunts forward. I don't really know what that is. It could just be a skill issue on my side, but yeah. But this is a really good quality of life for the weapon, right? Because it makes you run faster, which is great, and it just makes the usability of your grapple that much more. And you really do spend a lot of time using your grapple in Void Intercept bosses, especially if you're doing group-based content and you're doing something like Deathstalker or, whatever. Special augmentation, this is becoming something that is, I guess, meta to a degree when it comes to like running like high levels of, Void Erosion Purge. But and that's certainly the reason why this exists in the first place. But specifically for the goal of this weapon and what we're trying to do with this thing, which is kill Void Intercept bosses, it doesn't really matter. So I haven't even fucking touched it. This is literally like the 7 core that's still on there. Then we have a free and a hit augmentation slot. So the free slot could, the only things that make sense here is either firearm damage or firearm attack damage versus Colossus. That to me, right? And because I view this as my primary weapon that I use when I hunt down Void Intercept bosses, I, obviously went for as close to the max roll as I could with this. And I was really, really happy with the damage potential of this. Of course, the footage that's been running in the background has all been recorded with this exact one. I recorded it as soon as I was able to roll this 540. And yeah, man, it slaps. It gets the job done. Our hit augmentation is either weak point damage, firearm critical hit rate, or critical hit damage. Now, in a world where you want to use this weapon, but you don't want to use gun build characters that that via skill or passives increase the critical hit rate, I would say that there's a point to be argued that you could put firearm critical hit rate on here, because a level 10 core can go all the way up to 68%, and that's huge. That's huge, all right? But in the case where this is the primary weapon that I use with all of my gun descendants, it makes a lot more sense for me to do critical hit damage. And the reason for that is this. When we look at the weapon stats before we actually use Hailey's abilities, it's already fucking fearsome. It is sitting at a 30% chance to critical hit, but it's almost a 10 times multiplier, which is ridiculous. Once we then spin this puppy up, let me just activate my buff there. Now we can see, now we're going to start climbing up. Now we're not quite going to reach 100%, but we're going to get very close to that, sitting at 91.86%. Bear in mind that all Void Intercept bosses have critical hit resistances. Some have more than others. And so the point is, you aren't going to be critting 100% of the time. But 91% is or technically speaking 92% is a good enough breakpoint for me without having to change any of the other mods and kind of like make it unfavorable in there. So maybe losing more bullets in the magazine, for example, or something like that. So 91.86, but look at the critical hit damage multiplier, over 10 times. And that's when you factor in then that you have 205 bullets, which you are spinning up. And these ones are all like, as you're putting bullets into the enemy, you're stacking up your firearm attack even more, which means those crits are hitting even harder when they do crit. It's the reason why this is so juicy for me. So super happy with the way that this turned out. I'll always have a soft place in my heart for Enduring Legacy. I think it's the first weapon. Maybe, no, it was the second, because the first one was Thunder Cage that I made a 4 out of 4 version of. So it was the second one, and it was because I kind of like needed a really, really good weapon that I could use against Void Intercept bosses. Like most people, I'd been running, Tamer, and this was like Tamer on fucking crack. So now it's Tamer on double crack with a sprinkling of heroin or something. Like, the gun is insane. I really, really enjoy it. And I mean, I think we're capped out on weapon core 10s now. I believe the developer said it's not going to go any higher than that, but it's kind of weird for me to imagine a more powerful version of this. And one more thing, because I always forget to do this and people ask in the comments, of course, let me show you the Hailey build that I actually use when I do farm Void Intercept bosses, and the one that was also from the footage. So I would say this is a fairly standard Hailey gun setup. So this, of course, using Overwhelming Shield and Biosync Shield to kind of like keep me up. And then just the usual stuff. So we have, some mods that allow us to stay in our third skill kind of like forever, in strong mentality and energy collection. And then the rest of the mods are just ways that we increase our toughness. Shot focus, of course, in there for us just for some additional damage. The point being that we want to have a lot of shield so that we can tank these bosses if they start getting frisky with us. So sitting at about 23.5k of shield. So pretty comfortable. And like I said, this is the same boss that I also use for something like Deathstalker. So works really well. Gets the job done. I have a second one which I'm going to be building for just fire attack. So basically just just normal firearm attack damage, to see if I can turn it into a decent mobbing weapon as well. But that will be a video for another day. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I appreciate all the support on First Descendant content, and as always, fucking cheers.